I love the Walking Dead universe. If you're a fan of this channel, that should be no surprise to you. There used to be a time where being a fan of The Walking Dead and watching The Walking Dead was cool. Now, especially now, it's just kind of sad if you're still as big of a fanboy as me. But peak Walking Dead, I'm talking 2013, 2014. Picture me walking home from school every day, pinwheel hat on, going home, watching The Walking Dead seasons 1 and 2 over and over and over again. And when I wasn't doing that, I was reading the graphic novels. And if I wasn't doing that, I was probably playing The Walking Dead Survival Instinct or the Telltale games. But way back then, my heart knew something was missing. I wanted something else, something more. And I knew what it was back then. It was a third-person Walking Dead game where I could play as multiple characters from the TV show. Then all of a sudden, in 2013, 10 years later, like an RKO out of nowhere, The Walking Dead Destinies comes out. I had no idea this game was coming out until I did a trailer reaction for it maybe 2 months ago. And it felt like a long-lost dream finally coming true. Is it a dream coming true 10 years too late? Yes. Am I as excited now as I would have been 10 years ago? No. But I was still really, really excited for this game. And I got even more excited when I saw all the crazy trailers they were releasing for it.
From outcast.
It's you, Mr. Dixon.
To educator.
These here popsicles is ice cold, kiddos. Heat up.
Because the only thing scarier than the undead.
You're the best, Mr. Dixon.
Is keeping 6-year-olds occupied.
You just gonna leave the lights on like that?
One man is about to be pushed beyond his limits.
Hey, pal. What you doing there?
All mercy and no wrath. Wouldn't want Shane to become a dull boy, would you, Rick?
My mind just got filled with all the possible scenarios that could happen in this game. But then I saw who was publishing it. Game Mill, the same studio behind Skull Island, that video game that I'm sure you've seen every single person talk about on the internet. The game that's being dubbed the worst game of 2023, even worse than Gollum. So going into The Walking Dead Destinies, half of my brain was aware that it was probably gonna suck. Even before I knew that Game Mill was publishing it, I saw the gameplay in the trailer. I knew it probably wasn't going to be good. But the other half of my brain is remembering me 10 years ago, really wanting to play a game like this and just being so excited to finally play it. But anyway, I'm gonna review The Walking Dead Destinies for you. I'm gonna show you some raw gameplay in just a moment, but before I do that, you should consider subscribing. Like I already mentioned, I'm a huge fan of the Walking Dead universe, but I also love video games, more specifically horror video games, and I talk about it all the time on this page. I do reviews for a lot of horror games that come out, but I also talk about TV shows, I talk about movies, and I do trailer reactions. But enough with this intro. Let's talk about The Walking Dead Destinies. First, I'm going to tell you more specifically about what The Walking Dead Destinies is as a game, because I'm sure there's at least a fraction of people watching this video who don't really know and aren't that big of fans of The Walking Dead universe. You're probably here just because you're curious, but after that, I'm going to get into some pros and cons. So The Walking Dead Destinies is a third-person action-adventure, I guess you could say, video game where you play through the story of the first 4 seasons of the Walking Dead TV show. Different missions, you play as different characters, and that's one of the biggest selling points of the Walking Dead Destinies, is I believe there's 12 playable characters. And one of the other biggest selling points is that you make huge decisions in this game that can change the story from what you saw in the TV show. So where one character may have died, you can make them live. But it's third-person shooter, there's melee combat, there's some stealth, there's decision making, and there's a skill tree. But anyway, let's get into some pros of The Walking Dead Destinies. What does this game do well? Because even though, like I already mentioned, I was really looking forward to this game, my expectations in actuality were on the floor. First, let's talk about the combat, because the combat at times can be a lot better than I was expecting, honestly. Using your melee weapons to fight against hordes of walkers, or even just a couple walkers at a time, can be more exciting than I thought it was going to be. You often have to balance balance between your stamina. You want to make sure you don't run out of it because that can be deadly. Balancing between that and also your health and making sure you don't run out of ammo. And oftentimes there's a lot more walkers in an area than you may expect there to be. So at times it can feel like a genuine fight for survival. It can feel a lot more intense, these action sequences, at least more intense than I was expecting. But the game actually does a really good job of making you feel at times like you're trying to survive against deadly odds, like you're actually one person fighting against 20 or so walkers. And doing all that while playing as a character from a TV show, it really does add a lot to it, because this game, getting this out of the way right now, this game would be practically garbage if it wasn't for the Walking Dead license and the Walking Dead skin over everything. I don't know how good of a time I'd be having right now if I wasn't playing as Rick, if I wasn't playing as Shane and Maggie and Glenn. But I'm not gonna lie to you, for me it does enough to make me actually enjoy this game for the most part. And not just combat, but stealth, again, at times. I feel like I'm gonna say at times a lot in this review, but the stealth at times feels genuinely good. There's times when the level design has a lot of walkers on it, and it's not just an easy path to get to where you need to go. You actually need to use bottles as distractions like you do in a lot of other zombie games. But you have to do that, but you actually have to do it well. You actually have to place the distractions in the right places. And even then, it's not guaranteed that you just have a free shot to get to where you need to go. And there's times where you're going through an area stealthily and you think you're doing well, and then you turn a corner and a walker sees you, and that alerts a bunch of other walkers. And then when you thought you were going to get through somewhere very, very easily, you end up needing to, fight to survive, whether it be through melee combat or shooting or running. And all of this together did make a more enjoyable gameplay experience than I was expecting. It at times can be a genuinely fun challenge, dare I say. And it's not just walkers you're fighting against. There's actually human enemies, and they can be challenging as well, even though oftentimes they're dumb as nails.
Adrenaline is pumping.
But a lot of the challenge in this game, full disclosure, doesn't feel like it's designed to be challenging, like it's actually designed and programmed in a smart way. At times when you're doing more difficult missions, you can tell they just kind of up the programming, so to speak. Have this human enemy move faster, have their accuracy be better, have their damage do more damage than your typical walker or human enemy. So it kind of feels like cheap challenge sometimes, but not as cheap as a lot of other horror games I've been playing recently. But some missions in this game I leave surprised by the fact that I actually had fun. And like I said, one of the biggest selling points of this game is you get to change the outcome from what happened in the TV show. And it is actually, at least for me, exciting to get to the season 3 mark in the TV show. But when I got to season 3, Rick was dead, Carl was dead, but Shane was still part of my group, Merle was still part of my group, Dale was still part of my group. It was cool seeing things be very different from the show. And I was actually surprised to see that when Rick died, it wasn't just a cheap cutscene. It was actually a boss fight. A hilariously dumb boss fight, but still a boss fight.
Need to reload. Can't get distracted.
And I just loved seeing this world come to life in a video game. And I mean come to life very, very loosely. This isn't the most in-depth game, obviously. The locations that you're exploring, the bases that you're stationed at, they're not the most in-depth, and they do leave a lot to be desired. Don't get me wrong, I am going to get to the cons in just a moment. But again, like I've said so many times already, I've wanted a game like this for so long. So it was just cool to me seeing the Greene farm in a video game, seeing the prison in a video game. But anyway, that is where the pros end, at least for me, and now I'm gonna get into the cons. I said in my intro to this video that this game came out out 10 years too late. And I didn't just mean that because The Walking Dead hasn't been as popular as it used to be. I mean that this game is very, very dated. This game genuinely is 10 years too late. And that's being generous, honestly, because if this game came out in 2013, even then it would still feel dated. This feels like a really good, really polished, but it feels like a PS2 game at the end of the day. The mission structure, no matter what the narrative is that you're doing, no matter what the storyline is, the mission structure is always one of two things. It's either get from point A to point B. Just do that while maybe collecting things along the way. But if you're not doing that, you either just have to kill X amount of walkers. And then once those walkers are dead, the mission is over and you succeeded. It's really, really disappointing that the mission structure feels so uninspired and so lazy. It's genuinely one of the most linear games I've played in a very, very, very long time. Exploration is non-existent. There are times that you're stationed at whatever base you happen to be at the time, whether it's the Atlanta quarry or the Greene farm or the prison, but there's times that you get to, be at your base and talk to the survivors that are in your group. And that to me was one of the most disappointing aspects of this game. I wanted to explore the prison. I wanted to explore the farm. I wanted to have dialogue options with these characters. I wanted the decisions that I made along the way, the narrative choices that I made along the way, to change how these characters talked to me, to change their emotions, to change how they felt, to change how they interacted with you. But it never did. The choices that you make barely change anything. It just changes whether or not the character model you're playing as is Rick or Shane or someone else. And speaking of supporting characters, again, one of the biggest selling points of this game was that there were 12 or so playable characters. But really, when this game comes down to it, it's either you're playing as Rick or Shane probably 80% of the time, and then the last 20% of this game is you swapping between the supporting characters, and even then it's barely playing as them. By the time I got to season 3 of the TV show, I had played as Glenn once, and even in that one gameplay section, it was only 2 minutes long, and that is so disappointing. By the time I got to season 3, I hadn't even played as Daryl. That is just messed up. And there's no type of mission in this game where you get to choose the character you play as. The character you play as is always chosen for you. I thought there would at least be side quests where you can go on a supply run or do this, or just like go out into the woods and clear walkers. I was expecting them to be really cheap, lazy, uninspired side quests, but I thought they would at least be there. You know what I mean? I thought there would at least be that moment where you could choose who you played as, choose their loadouts, and just have fun. Even if it was fun you had to force upon it, have fun that you just kind of created yourself. But that's not there. And what's so disappointing is I thought that was going to be there, because when you're in your main bases, you get to open up a page that shows you expeditions you can go on. And they have descriptions that sound like they would be side quests. Like there's Glenn wants to go loot a pharmacy, or Carol wants to go look for Sophia, or whatever. But those aren't actually side quests. It's nothing that you do yourself. You just choose to do it, and then you'll get a radio call that it either was successful or it wasn't, and then you can alter whether or not it's successful or it fails because you're given like one choice when they call in. Like Daryl could be like, I hurt my foot, do you want me to stick it out or do you want me to come back? And the reward for doing those is just skill points. And also when you're at your base, there's no real dialogue with any of these characters. They feel non-existent. They feel like cardboard cutouts where you click a button on their chest and they just say a line that slightly resembles their TV show counterpart. And also, when you're playing as these characters, no matter who you're playing as, whether it's Maggie, Carol, Shane, Rick, Glenn, whatever, they all play the exact same way. There's absolutely no difference in the gameplay between all these characters, which I found super weird, because when you go to a menu of the characters, each character has skills underneath their icon. And at first I thought that meant that each character has their own unique set of skills. Okay, that could make gameplay feel unique depending on the character you're playing as. But when you choose a skill underneath a character, that skill unlocks for every single playable character in the game. So I don't even know why it's set up like that in the first place. And no matter what character you're playing as, they all say the exact same thing. When they get injured, when they get pinned down, when they get frightened, they all say the same exact line of dialogue. And it's really, really dumb and annoying because it's all different voice actors for these characters. At least they sound like different voice actors. These developers just really couldn't put in the effort to write 6 different lines at least and just give each of those lines to a different character. They had to have all these different voice actors record the exact same line of dialogue. Also, this is one of those games with no cutscenes. I don't even think there is a single cutscene that I saw in this game. It just does the thing that a lot of cheap games do, and it just shows you stills with dialogue over it. And also, this game broke a lot on me. There were at least 3 times in my few hours of gameplay that the mission just wouldn't continue. The game just completely forgot what it was supposed to do. So I had to close out of the game and reload it to force it to progress. And that's just always annoying no matter what game you're playing. But this is already a very short game, and for that to happen to me at least 3 times in a very short game is just sad. But really, if you're interested in this game, you have to know what kind of game this is. It's a bargain bin game. It really, really is. And I don't even mean like a Walmart bargain bin game or a Best Buy bargain bin game. I mean, this seems like the type of game you would see on the shelf at Five Below. Now that sounds really, really harsh, but that is the unfortunate truth for anyone that's not a Walking Dead fanatic like myself. But now I'm going to tell you my thoughts being a Walking Dead fanatic, and that is that despite all the criticisms I just gave this game, despite how bad and technically flawed I know that this game is, at the end of the day, I had fun. I enjoyed playing this game. The $50 spent on it, I feel personally like I didn't waste my money, but I know that I am an extreme outlier because compared to all of the reviews and the discussions that I saw around Skull Island, that game, this game looks like and plays like a near masterpiece compared to that. But if you're a Walking Dead fanatic like myself, if you love the Walking Dead universe as much as I have, if you've been looking forward to a game like this, but you go in with low expectations, you're probably going to feel similar to how I do. You're going to be disappointed, but at the end of the day, you're going to enjoy your time spent in this game. But if you're even slightly hesitant, if you're even slightly on the fence, wait. Either wait for a hefty sale because $50 for the average person, for the normal person, honestly, is not at all worth it for this game. Even at $30, that's pushing it. If you're slightly interested in this game, but you're not as big of a fanatic as myself, I'd say this game is probably worth it between $15 to $20. But if you're not at least a Walking Dead fan, I can't imagine you would get any enjoyment out of this game. Well, there you have it. There's my final thoughts on The Walking Dead Destinies. Have you played this game yet? If you have, do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? Let me know in the comments. And if you haven't played it yet, let me know if you plan on playing this game eventually, anytime soon in the future, or never, ever, ever, ever. Once again, consider subscribing, and thank you for watching, especially if you watched this far.